Okay, Salvatore Brickman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified YouTube channel. And today we're talking about testing, and specifically testing as it relates to your product. So I did another YouTube video on marketing testing, right? And like, how do you know if people are gonna buy your product? But I wanted to make another video on actually testing out the prototype and the idea that you have. So going from idea to paper to then prototype and to then having a really good sense of like, this is a good product for people. We're covering that today. So in order for this to be helpful, you need to first think a little bit backwards, I think, to the actual idea of the product, right? So the idea of a product, every good product idea will solve a problem of some kind. It could be entertaining, it could be a novelty item, but that's still, solving a problem, right? So every idea has a problem that it aims to solve. And usually when it comes to Kickstarter, Indiegogo products, typically it's gonna be like an enhancement to an existing product, or it's gonna be a bit of a leap forward when it comes to the other products that are out there, maybe better design, right? So the first of all is that you wanna take a piece of paper and you wanna write down some of the assumptions that you have. Now this could be assumptions like people are really gonna like the design, they're gonna like the look and feel, this is what's gonna differentiate it from the competition, this is what I think is the reason why I'm so passionate about this product and why I think it's gonna stand out. Write down some of the assumptions that you have. And I know that sounds very basic, but I promise you, that will allow you to be much more thoughtful and much more analytic and scientific about doing this entire process. So write down the assumptions that you have, right? This is kind of like goes back to the scientific method. So I was never a very good student in school. I didn't really like going to school, but one of the things I took away is this idea of the scientific method, right? So the scientific method is all about having hypotheses, then running an experiment to test out those hypotheses, and then you have the results which you analyze, right? So for example, I hypothesize that people are gonna buy this product in droves because it's smaller, it's more lightweight, it's easy to hold in your hand, ergonomic design. You have all these hypotheses, right? And then what you're gonna do is next, we're gonna create an experiment, if you will, to test out some of these hypotheses that we have, and then we're going to analyze those results. So let's just start with, let's just say, the look and the feel of the product as compared to some of the other ones out there, so that it's going to really visually pop. People are gonna like the design of it more than something else that's out there. So for example, let's just say that you created a new way that you can grow potted plants in the home, and it's a very nice looking pot of some kind, and maybe it also waters it, right? So in order to kind of test this out first, it might be the actual design and the look and the feel of it. So you might first start with getting people's impression of the look and the feel of the product. So that could be the prototype which you create, maybe being 3D printed. It could be just creating a three-dimensional realistic rendering, a 3D rendering, I'm having trouble saying that for some reason, a 3D rendering of the product, right? Which you can show to other people and they can visually see it. But if you just try to, from the idea stage, convey that to people like, this is gonna be so well designed, they're not gonna really be able to give you any meaningful feedback. So you can't really test this assumption at all. In order to test the assumption on design, you're probably gonna need a 3D realistic rendering, or you're gonna need a prototype that looks somewhat like the finished one, or really well designed looking page that you can show people so they can give you feedback, right? And the second that they give you that feedback, it might be, that's amazing, this looks so cool, right? Or it might be, yeah, looks interesting, right? So you can get a little bit of feedback there. Let's just say another assumption. So another assumption is that it's going to work a lot better, and it's going to be easy to hold in your hand, and it's going to be very natural, maybe smaller. If it's an EDC product, it can fit easily in your pocket, right? Or you can snap it to your belt or something like that. So for that, you're going to need not necessarily a functional prototype, but you're going to need a prototype that shows how the user will interact with it. So this could be like a foam core, for example, prototype. It could be a 3D printed one. It could be, I think there's Shigru or some other useful kits out there that you can use to sort of make a clay looking product, just to get an idea of what it's going to look like, the look and the feel, how it's going to hold in your hand. Right? If you're walking across the room, this is what it's going to look like when it's on the table. So you get a sense of, it's kind of hard for me to make a video on like every product category out there, so I'm trying to cover a lot, right? But let's just say like, if you're in a workout environment or something like that, you can get a sense of the size compared to some of the other machinery, or you can get a sense of, if it's meant to be on your desk, how it's going to look on the desk, right? Just based on more of like a very low level kind of prototype that's not really very functional yet. So I call that a look and feel prototype, right? So there are some other ways. I can maybe link to an article below if I remember to that I wrote that will go through some of these other tools that you can use to make that thing. So that would be sort of a way to test the look and the feel assumption that you have, which is going to look nicer. It's going to be better looking than some of the other stuff that's out there. Now, if we get a little bit further down the line and we start to make assumptions like this thing is going to increase, let's just say you're doing you invented a new airplane or something like that. And in order for this airplane, you invented a new like paper airplane. That was actually one of the Kickstarter campaigns that did really well. You invented a new paper airplane, and this paper airplane was a lot easier to fly and a lot more fun to fly, and maybe even had a little bit of robotic control to it that you could control with your phone or something like that. Your assumption is that that's going to be more fun, right, than a traditional paper airplane. So in order to test that one, you would need to have some kind of a functioning prototype that syncs up to the phone and that actually works. It doesn't have to be the full-fledged thing, but it has to at least demonstrate the functionality of the product, right? In order for you to test that assumption, you are going to need a functional prototype. So the reason, again, why I talk about listing out assumptions is that for some of the assumptions you have, you don't necessarily need a functioning prototype yet. Eventually you will, but you don't necessarily need to yet. So you should be thinking like, okay, based on my idea and the stage that I'm in, these are the assumptions I have. Maybe I could just start with a 3D rendering, or maybe I could just start with a prototype that looks and feels kind of like it. Doesn't work yet though, right? And then from that point, I can then go to the next phase, which is now I want to test out this other assumption, which is I want to see, does it actually work better? Okay, now we need a functioning prototype of some kind that actually does the job, right? So maybe for that, I need to either get some supplies around the house that I can use to make something, or I need to consult with an engineer if it's a little bit more electrical engineering focused, or I need to get a CAD drawing so I can begin to think about the dimensions and putting this thing together, right? So it goes from stage to stage to stage. And eventually you get to a point in time where all of the assumptions that you have been tested out, and you've probably gone through a few different iterations. So through each different product cycle, let's just say the look and the feel stage, right? You went through the first iteration where you had a 3D rendering made and they didn't like it. Like no one liked the look and the feel. Okay, I need to hire a designer now, right, to help me out. So design maybe isn't my strong suit. Now I need to get a designer. You get a designer, you get a better 3D rendering together that looks cooler, then a lot of people like it. Okay, we checked off that little box. Now let's move down the chain to the next part of the stage. So this is also used, I'd say, in order to do iterative processing. So it's not like from point A to point Z and you just go, flying down the highway from point A to point Z. It's more of like an iterative process where you're going through this cycle many, many different times. And after you've gone through different iterations as well, when it gets closer and closer to the end stage of the product with the way that it works, the way that it functions, the materials, right, that it's made out of, how the materials that it's made out of affects your tooling costs, affects the weight and the dimensions of the product, which will then affect your shipping, right? As you get going down this process, you're gonna have more and more realizations. So you're like, maybe instead of doing this, I'm gonna do this. Or instead of having it made out of this material, I'm gonna have it made out of this material, right? Or instead of doing the electrical engineering this way, I'm gonna make it a lot easier and just put it in a plastic case, right? So you'll have these what I call mini revelations, right? Those like aha, like eureka moments as you're going through the process. And the more of these that you begin to have, the more it comes from this like perfect idea in your head, which just started as like working perfectly, everyone loving it. It's in your head because it hasn't made contact yet with the real world. Once you get the idea from your head into the real world, all of a sudden it's bound by the laws of physics, it's bound by other people's opinions, it's bound by your own skills as a designer or as a product engineer or whatever your skill set is as a marketer, right? And then you start to work through it. And eventually, at the end of this process, you get something that maybe is a bit different than the idea you had in your head, but it's pretty freaking good, right? And that's really the point when you then begin to explore, okay, we have a great product, we have something that people need, that we think that people want. How are we going to then test this in the marketing side, which I already made a video about that. And in addition, how are we going to do a launch for this? So whether that's a launch on Indiegogo, on Kickstarter, are we going to go straight to e-commerce? Are we going to start to approach maybe some people who to try and license the product? By the way, I find that to be a very difficult channel, is trying to get like a big name brand to license your product. Are we going to try eventually to go to like the Shark Tank route? Are we going to go and try to do this wholesale and sell this to a bunch of different retail outlets across the country? That's when we begin to get to a much more finished stage. So my role in this process, aside from putting out YouTube videos and being a coach and helping through these stages, it's really to try to demystify this for you, because I feel like it's just been very archaic for so many years, this step-by-step process of putting together a product, as well as marketing it, launching it, getting funding for it, generating sales for it, and then transitioning into a full-fledged business. I think that this process deserves a lot more attention, a lot more, I would say, formulaic thinking behind it. And the same way that I kind of, put together the book, the Kickstarter launch formula, eventually I want to work on getting something out that's going to help you in terms of formulaically going through this process to get something made in the least expensive way, in a way that's going to make you feel good about it, make you feel confident, and still maintains that original vision that you have for the product. So I'm also doing something new. So I have a lot of great stuff out there. Obviously, you can book a one-on-one coaching call with me. It's a paid call. I'm also going to begin to start to accept a couple of free calls every once in a while. So if there is the option for a free call, it's not going to be with me, it's going to be with a member of my team. Then you can book that down below if it's still available. Honestly, I don't know when this video comes out if it's still going to be available. This is more of like an experimental thing that I'm doing. But I also have some other great stuff. I have kickstarterforum.org. I have my Facebook group. I have a ton of different ways in which you can get in contact with me. I am a very busy guy, but I love seeing the comments. I always try to reply when I can to comments on YouTube. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Sal, and I will see you next time.